Okay, year 10. So we're looking at a brand new poem today. We're looking at a poem called My Parents, and we're going to explore how a poet presents the experience of bullying in childhood through the use of simile and metaphors. That's our lesson objective today. Now, it's always a good idea when you get a question in the exam or in class for your assessments, it's a good idea to look at the question itself, because the keywords in the question can give you a really good hint at what the poem is about. So I'm just going to underline that keyword bullying there. That gives us a really key clue as to what this poem is going to be about. Now, bullying is a word that you're all familiar with. It's something that you learn about at school, in PSHE and with your form tutor. So that word should automatically bring some images and emotions to you, which are really going to help you to analyse the poem. So I'd like us to start off with just capturing a little definition of what bullying is. So bullying is, and then finish off that sentence, please. So bullying is, go. Okay, so you should have a little idea jotted down there about a definition of bullying. So bullying is repeated behaviour intended to hurt somebody. So I'm going to put the word hurt there. And so this idea, but bullying is hurt, and it's this idea that it can be emotional or physical. Okay, so I've not put that in a whole sentence, just a couple of notes. So bullying is something that's intended to hurt somebody either emotionally or physically. Okay, and we've got our versatile vocabulary, so keywords that we're looking at today. We've got this word inferior and superior, which are our keywords today. So inferior, not as good as something, or superior, feeling better than somebody. Think about how those two words could really link to this theme of bullying, okay? Making somebody feel or feeling inferior, or how bullying could make somebody feel perhaps superior to others, okay? So I think there's some really good vocabulary that link well to that theme. In terms of your other vocabulary that we've looked at, some really nice links to those themes there. You could look at the morality of bullying, how immoral it can be. Emotional, we've already said that it's quite an emotional experience, not a rational one. Bullying can cause chaos, can make somebody feel vulnerable. Okay, so all of these like negative emotions we could associate with that idea of bullying. Okay, now we're going to do something a little bit different in that I'm not going to read the poem to you. I want you to independently get into the habit of reading that poem for yourself. So it's called My Parents. It's by Stephen Spender. There's only 3 stanzas, so I'm just going to give you 2 minutes just to read through the poem, and then we will look at going through the narrative. Okay, go. Okay, so you should have read through the poem now. We're just going to have a look at the story, the narration within the poem. So we'll start that together. So we're going to look at a couple of ideas. You've been doing this for your other poems now, so you should be used to this. Okay, so what is happening actually in that first stanza? So 2 ideas, just a couple of notes. What is happening in that first stanza? We'll do the first one together. So I would say the narrator comes across as a child, is not allowed to play with other children. It's his parents that have decided he's not allowed to play with those other children, and those other children are introduced to us as quite rough. Okay, so his parents have told him he's not allowed. My parents kept me from children who are rough. He's not allowed to play with other children. Have you ever been in that experience where your parents have said, no, you can't play with them, I don't want you playing with them, they're a bad influence, I don't want you to go in here, you're not allowed to go there. It's that kind of idea. Okay, let's have a look at the next stanza then. 2 ideas, what is happening in this stanza here, okay, and then the final stanza there. Go. Okay, so 3rd and 4th stanza, we'll just go through this together because it's really important you've got this idea of what's happening in the poem. I fear more than tigers, their muscles like iron. So we've got this idea, I feared, so fear's repeated there, so we've got quite an idea that actually these children are bullying him, okay? So he is bullied by these children. He is bullied by these children, and there is a real sense of fear within that stanza. Okay, so he's bullied by these children, there's a real sense of fear. Okay, and then the last stanza, a little bit more open to interpretation. I think there's a little shift maybe in the tone here. We've got this idea of fear again, that they sprang out behind hedges like dogs to bark at my world, and they threw mud. So we've still got that sense of fear, but then we've also got a sense of, while I look the other way, pretending to smile, I long to forgive them, but they never smile back. So it's almost as though he tries to be better than them, tries to have a sense of morality over them, maybe superiority even, but we'll explore that in a little bit more a little bit later. So just to summarise then, this poem, the narrator not allowed to play with other children, his parents won't let him, those other children are deemed as being rough, he's bullied by those children, there's a sense of fear, he fears those children, but he tries to be better than them, he tries to cope in other ways, and he tries to be better than them. So that's a quick summary of the poem. Let's think of who the speaker of the poem is. So who do you think the speaker of this poem is? And finally, what do you think the tone of the poem is? Okay, so we're not told who the speaker is precisely. We get the impression that the narrator is the speaker, that he might be a child because of the influence of his parents, and this is very much a childhood issue. And the tone, it's about bullying, there's a sense of fear in there, so it's not light-hearted and comical, it is quite serious and sad and emotional. Okay, so we've got a very sort of serious, sad, emotional tone there. Okay, now going back to our lesson objective, it's about similes and metaphors. So we're going to start looking at some of those key similes within the poem. Okay, so we're going to start just looking at that key simile in the first stanza, who threw words like stones. So he's talking about these other children, and he describes them as throwing words like stones. And this reminds me of that real sort of common idiom, that common phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And I think it's a real sort of play on that that idea. So who threw words like stones? Let's unpick this simile here. So we know it's a simile because it's got that comparison, is comparing the words that are spoken to being like stones. Let's have a look at the verb threw first of all. So if you throw something, okay, so if I'm throwing a shot put or I'm throwing a pen across the classroom, if you throw something, what kind of action is it? Okay, so if you throw something, you're not dropping something, it's not an accident. Okay, so if you throw something, it is very deliberate. Okay, so if you throw something, what kind of action is it? Is it soft? Is it powerful? Okay, so just a couple of ideas there, 30 seconds. Or if you throw something, what kind of action is it? Okay, then let's have a look at what is being thrown. So it isn't stones that are being thrown, just like stone is the comparison. So he threw words, okay, threw words like stone. So if we said throwing is quite a powerful action, but this time he's throwing words, so something that is spoken. That's my attempt at a speech bubble. Throw words, okay. Is that likely to be an insult or a compliment? Okay, so if you throw words, is that likely to be an insult or a compliment if you throw words? So throw in something powerful. Here we're talking about throwing words. Is that likely to be an insult or a compliment? Okay, so just jot down your ideas. Would throwing words be an insult or a compliment? Okay, let's have a look at the second part of the simile then. We've got the comparison to stone. So stone, what kind of material is stone? What would happen if you threw a stone at somebody? Okay, so what kind of object is a stone? Okay, and start thinking then what would happen if they threw a stone at somebody. It's likely to be quite painful. If it hit you, get into a lot of trouble. So let's think about the emotions now. Emotions are associated with this image of throwing stones. That's really going to help us unpick how the narrator is feeling at the very beginning of this poem. Okay, so what emotions are associated with this image of throwing stones? Okay, hope you've got some ideas. Just going to turn my paper over. Okay, so we've got a very much a sense of a very emotional side of bullying. If we go back to that definition of bullying, where's it now? Bullying is repeated behaviour intended to hurt emotionally or physically. Okay, so if we're talking about throwing words, we've got a very emotional side of bullying there. We haven't got anything physical. That is, until we come to the second stanza. We're going to pull out the second simile that we're going to look at. I feared more than tigers, their muscles like iron. Okay, so their muscles like iron. Let's jot that down. Their muscles like iron. Okay, so let's start with iron. What kind of material is iron? Okay, what kind of material is iron? Why might you compare muscles to iron? What kind of material is it? And I'm going to add a little stretch for you here. You don't have to do this, but you can think about it if you can. How could we link iron to a feeling of restriction? You might need a little bit of history knowledge here in terms of how crime and punishment maybe. Okay, so we've got an attempt there at a clue to help you, something that iron is often associated with. Okay, so just have a think about that if you can. So what type of material is iron? Okay, so you should have had a couple of ideas linked there. Let's look at the first part of the simile now. We've got this idea of muscles. Okay, so maybe quite a macho image. There we go. Muscles. What do we associate then with muscles? Okay. Two ideas, please. What do you associate with muscles? Go. So the first stanza was very much talking about the emotional sides of bullying, the words thrown like stones. Now we've got some real sort of physical representation of bullying. We've got the muscles like iron, knees tight on my arms. So still thinking about that muscles like iron. I want you in a sentence now. I'll put it here that I want a sentence. Okay. I want you to tell me, how is the narrator feeling here? So in direct link to that quote, muscles, they're muscles like iron. How is the narrator feeling? And I want you to think about our vocabulary today. And our vocabulary was inferior and superior. So muscles like iron, okay, that really hard material. What do you think, or who do you think is feeling inferior and why? And who do you think is feeling superior here and why? So how is the narrator feeling here in one sentence? And I want you to try and use these key pieces of vocabulary. Okay, go. Okay, so just to recap then, we've had my parents kept me from children who were rough with threw words like stones. This idea he's not allowed to play with his children. There's some emotional bullying taking place, and then in this stanza we get this real physical representation of bullying. And then we're going to look at the final simile for this lesson, and that is they were lithe, which just means they were quite supple and able to and springy. They sprang out behind hedges like dogs to bark at my world. So we've got like dogs to bark at my world. That's the third simile that we're going to look at. We'll look at a metaphor if we've got time. Okay, so we've got like, so they jumped out at him like dogs to bark at my world. Let's think about the comparison to dogs now. So it's the children that he is comparing, these rough children. He's now comparing them to dogs. Okay, so let's think about a dog. What type of creature is a dog? So first of all, it's an animal. What kind of animal is it though? What would you associate with a dog? I've got a dog. Quite loyal. What else would you associate with a dog? Okay. And we've got this idea that the dog is barking, the dog is making a lot of noise. But I think there's a little shift here in the way that the narrator is feeling. Let's see if I can draw it. See if that... Right, there's my crude picture of a dog barking. But if you're thinking about a dog and a human, okay, so a person, who is in control? If you're thinking about the relationship between a dog and a human, who generally is in control? Normally the human, isn't it? The human commands and is in charge of the dog. Okay, so in a dog adult human relationship, who is more superior? And who is inferior? Okay, so think about that relationship now. So he says, like dogs to bark at my world, is now calling the children, comparing them to dogs, who are animals, in terms of the human-dog relationship. Who's more superior and who is more inferior? So think maybe about that shift in emotions and power now. Okay, and let's see if that can lead us to answering this question. How does the narrator now feel about the other children? And try and use that vocabulary. Inferior and superior. And look, think back about our narration that we did. In that final stanza we said he's trying to be better than them. I looked the other way, pretending to smile. I longed to forgive them, but they never smile. So we said that he's trying now to be better than those other children. Some of you that are thinking ahead with this poem, you might want to make, I think there's some really nice links that you could make here to Blood Brothers if you've studied that, or even in Inspector Calls, this idea of social class. See if you can think about how that might come into play here in this poem, and this sense of inferiority and superiority. Okay, so we're running short on time, so I'm going to wrap up a little bit. But if you get a chance in your independent study, I'd go back to the poem and I'd pull out as well a couple of key ideas. Look at the metaphor salt course in that second stanza and see if you can come up with an interpretation, different layers of meaning with that metaphor. I think it's a really nice one. Look at the verbs ran, climbed and stripped to describe the children at the beginning, and also have a look at that very first line, my parents kept me. I think you could look at that idea of kept me, you could look at different interpretations of that. So that's your stretch. If you get a chance this afternoon, I'd go back to the poem and I would look at some of those key ideas there. Just to wrap up then, I'd like you to have a look at this question. How does the poet present the experience of bullying in childhood? Okay, I would like you to use the word inferior and superior, some of that key vocabulary, physical and emotional. Just one sentence, just one example of something that we've looked at today. There's a sentence starter for you there. The poet presents the experience of bullying through the simile, and then put the quote and then do your analysis of that simile. We'll look at writing a comprehensive response to the poem in tomorrow's lesson or in your next lesson. Okay, thank you, Year 10.